Shalom Bimroma. Ose Shalom, Ose Shalom Bimroma. Uyase Shalom, Uyase Shalom, Uyase Shalom, Uyase Shalom. Ose Shalom, Ose Shalom Bimroma. Ose Shalom, Ose Shalom Bimroma. Uyase Shalom, Uyase Shalom, Uyase Shalom, Uyase Shalom. Ose Shalom, Ose Shalom Bimroma. Ose Shalom, Ose Shalom Bimroma. Thank you very much. That was an Ose Shalom that I wrote a bunch of years ago. And now we're gonna jump to a L'Chadodi melody. The melody is pretty repetitive, so if you catch on eventually, feel free to sing along. לקראת קלה בני שבת נקרא אליו שמור וזכור בדיבור אחד השמיענו אל המיוחד אדוני אחד ושמו אחד לשם ותפארת ולתחילה
לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה כי היא מקור הברכה מראש מקדם נסוכה סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה אוי ושלום עטרת פעלה גם בשמחה ובצלה תוך אמוני עם סגולה אוי חלה אוי חלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה נקבלה
We got one more for you, if that's all right.
This is With Compassion, based on the text of the Rosh Hashanah Day 2 Haftorah. will come with weeping. With compassion I will guide them. They will come with weeping. With compassion I will guide them. I will lead.
I will lead. I will lead
to streams of water by a level road
where they will not stumble.
Bifri avot,
lo yikashlu ba.
Bifri
avot, lo yikashlu ba. They will come with weeping. With compassion I will guide them. They will come with weeping. With compassion I will guide them.
I will lead.
I will lead.
I will lead to streams of water by a level road
where they will not stumble.
Bifri avot,
lo yikashlu ba.
Bifri avot,
lo yikashlu ba.
I will lead.
I will lead.
I will lead.
I will lead.
I will lead. We will not
Thank you very much.
More. Unbelievable.
No.
More later.
To come to the next chapter. We'll cede the floor to you, Rabbi.
Yeah, I'm sure. Jacob, what's next? Beautiful guys, really.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming. My name is Jacob Nurek. I am the Assistant Director of Adult Programming for the Bronfman Center for Jewish Life. But more importantly, I would like to introduce our panelists for tonight. Rabbi Jeff Salkin is one of the most prolific and most quoted rabbis in America, whom people describe as courageous and always relevant. After a rich career as a congregational rabbi, Jeff co-founded and co-directs Wisdom Without Walls, an online salon for Jewish ideas, which engages Jews in conversation with significant Jewish thinkers about American Judaism post-October 7th. Rabbi Rachel Ain is the rabbi of Sutton Place Synagogue. She currently sits on the Chancellor Rabbinic Cabinet of the Jewish Theological Seminary. And our moderator tonight, Rabbi David Ingber, Senior Director of Jewish Life here at 92NY and of the Bronfman Center for Jewish Life, and founder of Romemu on the Upper West Side, the largest renewal congregation in North America. Thank you all for coming tonight. If you like what you see and hear, you can find out more on our website, 92ny.org, and our Instagram page, 92nd Street Y. For tonight, we have limited physical books for purchase tonight, so please look out for our book selling table and find any of our team members with a QR code to secure a copy of this important book. At a time when many struggle to find relevance in prayer, Rabbi Jeffrey Salkin, Rabbi Rachel Ain, and Rabbi David Ingber invite us to rediscover what it means to experience God in daily life. Please enjoy.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. A bit of a segue, kind of a bit of an awkward, remarkably, importantly awkward segue from actually being in prayer to talking about it, being in devotional space with harmonies and music and creativity into the talking about the thing, which is kind of abrupt in a way, but also very much, I think, of a piece with how difficult it is to have conversations in general in religious life about prayer, because often you know what prayer is when you're in it, and often it's hard to find places to actually be in it. On the one hand, on the other hand, it's also difficult at times to have honest conversations about what's happening in prayer, and specifically in liturgy and in the actual the Siddur, the prayer book. So it's really great to begin tonight to have this conversation after that beautiful musical prayer experience that you provided. Thank you to all the musicians. So Jeffrey, welcome back.
Thank you, David.
Feels like we're here on a pretty regular basis, and it's great to have you, Rachel, as well. We're going to be first name, because we are, and, rabbis like us.
To quote the movie, is this on?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Okay.
So welcome back, and I love the title of the book, Inviting God In, which is, of course, like a takeoff on the story of the Kutzker Rebbe, where the Kutzker Rebbe, one of the great Hasidic masters, is asked by a student, where do we define God? And Kutzker said famously, wherever you let God in. And so the invitation to come in. So you start your book confessing that you're clueless about football and ballet, and then you use that to describe how people feel in synagogue. People coming into synagogue can feel clueless to some extent, a little bit lost. And that metaphor, when did that first click in for you? That metaphor, the ballet and football metaphor, what it's like to walk in cluelessly into a synagogue.
Well, first of all, it's great to be here, and I want to also acknowledge not only my colleagues and my friends, but Raphael Chaikin, who is sitting at the table, who's the director of the CCR Press, and we do have some books here. And he was very skillful in really helping to craft what this project was and what it became. My first book in 1992 was called Putting God on the Guest List, and it was about finding spirituality in bar and bat mitzvah. Apparently, the children who became bar and bat mitzvah after reading that book are now themselves having children who are preparing for bar and bat mitzvah, so that makes me feel old. And I noticed when I wrote the book, and I was responding to the fact that a lot of people at B'nai Mitzvah ceremonies were sort of sitting there like they were at the dentist's office. Their arms were folded, and they were kind of sitting back, just waiting for it to be done with. And I realized that, yes, as I am clueless about football, also opera, there's a long list of things I'm clueless about, that a lot of people were just clueless about prayer and the meaning of prayer. But more than that, I noticed a curious lack of curiosity about prayer, which is to say that over the last 40 years or so, most synagogues that I know have a Torah study group that sometimes meets on Shabbat morning, and people dig into the words of the Torah portion, but there are very few, though Rachel has told me that Sutton Place Synagogue has it now, places that actually study the words of the Siddur. So I think that is an important note, and it was an inspiration for me to write this book because I want people to think about what this means.
So what does it mean? I'm just going to ask you, and just a couple more questions, Jeff, and I'm really curious to hear your thoughts, Rachel, especially about your experience. I was really taken by that, what you said backstage about having your minion, your group every day loves to talk about the Siddur, loves to learn from the Siddur, and you teach them. But Jeffrey, if someone's sitting in services and thinking, I've got no idea what's going on, right? So they're like that, the lack of curiosity, or maybe even there was curiosity, but they don't know where to begin. What's your advice for them? You're kind of like inviting them into this beautiful, rich, exciting Siddur, the prayer book, the liturgy, the composite of all of our people's hopes and yearnings put into word form in some in some form. What's the covenant? What's the intention that you give people like that when they're walking into?
It's interesting because it hit me like lightning a number of years ago. There is a phrase in one of the prayers, "V'tein chelkenu b'toratecha," give us our portion in your Torah. And there's a mystical sense that God has a Torah on high and that maybe we should have a section of that. But I think in a simpler sense, it is give us that piece of the scroll that was intended for us and for us alone. And I advise people on a deeply spiritual level, and I've had this experience, by the way, at Romamu, and I assume that I would have it at Sutton Place Synagogue as well, which is focusing on one phrase in a prayer and staying with it and letting it roll around in your mind. And one of the things that I was never quite able to do as a congregational rabbi, I tried to, but people didn't like it, which was...
Wow, that's I love that. You could have, that's a list. The things that you tried to, people didn't like it.
Let me just start with Aleph at the moment. I would sometimes do that when I was leading the prayers, and I would forget that it's my job to get them to the Oneg Shabbat and get them to the Kiddush. But when I am a prayer, a lay person in someone else's shul, that's how I do it. I stick with a phrase, I meditate on the phrase, and some of those meditations made their way into inviting God in.
I love it because my Rebbe, Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, of blessed memory, whom some called the prayer whisperer or the davening whisperer, used to say that we often think of the Siddur, the prayer book, as either as the meal instead of as a cookbook. And you wouldn't eat the cookbook. It's not very nutritious. And so he kind of wanted to imagine what it would be like to use pieces of it to cook prayer, as it were. He once said that we should think of the prayers as freeze-dried prayers that you bring your hot water, your kavanah, your intention to, and that becomes the meal. And so to kind of sit in one fragment or one piece and say, before I move on and finish everything on my davening or my prayer plate, why don't I allow this piece to kind of to chew on it? I often think of, in Hinduism, when you chew on food, there's life force in it, and the taste of it is its life force, and you chew it until there's no longer taste in it. And then you've absorbed all of its nutrients. You're saying, take a fragment, take a piece, let it speak to you. It could be a word, it could be a couple of words together. Stop there and allow yourself to seep in that and have an experience. You don't have to know the whole prayer book. You don't have to know where we started and where we're going. But that's kind of a doorway into a prayerful experience, if I'm hearing you correctly.
You are. And for me, for example, that word could be echad in the Shema. What does it mean for God to be one? What does it mean for me to be one? What does it mean for me to take all the roles that I play in life and to stack them up and to figure out where's the essential Jeff in all this when I strip them all away? It could be ahava, it could be love. It could be v'davkenu b'mitzvotecha, glue us to your commandments. For me, it's really kind of beautiful in one sense, which is that I figured out a number of years ago, and I wrote this in the book as well, why is the Torah written without vowels? Because it's only revelation in potential. It's like the powdered meal. You have to bring your voice to the scroll in order for the scroll to really be what it is. And I think that's true about prayer as well.
So tell me, Rachel, a little bit about this and how it lands for you as the rabbi of Sutton Place and as a rabbi out in the field.
Sure.
Right? You have this prayer community regularly, daily, 3 times a day, sometimes online, obviously over the weekends. Where does this conversation land for you? And in particular, we're kind of also wondering, all of us know that there are certain things in the prayer service that are kind of like places where everybody knows the lyrics, or everybody knows the kind of the melodies. Yeah. Sometimes I think Jeff had said it's kind of like a concert. At one point in the book, he said it's like a concert where people know. Where does this land for you, and what are your favorite moments or your community's favorite moments where they are also a part of this experience?
So I think that in order to get into prayer and to think about how to connect to prayer, we can't expect to have those aha moments all of the time, every time. Because if we expect that to happen all of the time, every time, we're going to be deeply disappointed. And so it's to manage expectations. And I don't say that in a negative way. If we expect to have an aha moment every time we walk out the door, we're just not. Sometimes we have great days, sometimes we don't. And there's different ways of connecting with prayer. So what I tell my congregants, some who are very familiar with prayer, some who are less familiar with prayer, is take time to study the prayers before you arrive. For example, so you said about the concert. No one would ever show up at a concert without listening to the music in advance. I wouldn't. I'm not a big concert person. I was like a radio person in high school. I didn't have tapes, cassettes, CDs, now whatever.
What are those?
I was never a big person who bought music. Sorry for the musicians in the room. So I wasn't a big person who chose to go to concerts. But if I was, I would have to listen to the music in advance in order to appreciate what I was going to hear. How much the more so with prayer. We need to study it. We need to think about it. We need to appreciate it. So that's one thing. We need to study it. And so coming here tonight and thinking about how do you engage? How do you go deep? What does it mean? So every morning, as you referenced, one thing we do in our minyan is we take a little piece of the tefillah, and I try to give just a 2 to 3 minute teaching about what it might mean, what's a spiritual insight into it. So somebody can take away a learning that they might not have had before. How do they potentially think about it differently? That's one way of doing it on a very micro level. I agree with Jeff that is there a moment to just ponder a prayer, think about, don't get caught up in keeping up with the people next to you so that you are rushed to finish the way everyone else is, but go at your own pace, that's fine. The other thing, not so much a concert. I have some people here from my shul. Everyone at my shul knows I'm a huge sports fan, and I love the metaphor of thinking about sporting events. And 2 years ago on the high holidays, I referenced a great article in the New York Times where somebody wrote about the big house at Michigan. So if you are a Michigan fan here, go blue.
Go
I
blue.
am not a Michigan fan. I'm a Texas fan.
Go Longhorns.
I became a Texas fan. My son is a junior. So I've become enthused about college football. But it's really incredible what the college sports scene has created. It's a religion. And the question is, how do we translate religious moments like college sports and that shared experience into prayer spaces? How do we create the same songs, the same enthusiasm, the same love, the same commitment? And I think there are moments that happen in a sanctuary. So you asked, what is it? I think when people are singing the Kedusha together, there's often that tune that people can sing, the Lador Vador, and we're singing it together, or the Aleinu. Maybe it's because people are really excited that it's almost time for Kiddush, or Adon Olam, or Vayhi bin Soa Haron. For me, I say I went to JTS, and the intellectual part of me is able to recognize, yes, the documentary hypothesis, and we can talk about how is the Torah written and all of that. But when I'm sitting in shul and the ark is opened, it's like my Sinai moment, and there's revelation again, and I can hold a really spiritual moment there. So the late Rabbi Neil Gilman used to say the second naivete, appreciating this powerful moment of prayer in community, for me, is extraordinary.
I find one of the great parallels in what you're saying, thinking about just what has happened this week. It's been a very, very intense week. Thinking of the death of Bobby Weir of the Grateful Dead. And I wrote an article yesterday in my column, Martini Judaism, for those who want to be shaken and stirred, religionnews.com. I write twice a week. I have no unpublished thoughts.
Pride, though, right?
And I wrote about how deadism is a religion. Fish is a religion. My kids are into fish.
Let's unpack that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Please.
Yeah. So what we say here, I think, in the language of using categories like religion and religious experience, I think if tell me if I'm wrong here, because I thought a lot about this, because one of the ways that I wanted to build Romu was around this phenomena. What we're talking about are the constituent pieces of state change. In other words, when we put together music and we took in frequency and harmony and all of the anatomical and other elements that go into Michigan Wolverines chant songs or Dead concerts or a beautiful piece of music that we've just experienced, something's happening that is quantifiable and locatable in the individual that is a state change. Something has happened, the rate of the heart changes, the brain frequencies have changed, and what we've induced is essentially the physiological and other components that lead to a contemplative or other state of consciousness. It's not just sociological where we're saying, oh, this has group dynamics, like we all know that we're Texas Longhorn fans and we're wearing those colors, or there's something affective happening that is deeply transformative in the sense of a state change, right? Ecstatic or whatever you want to call it. Something is happening at a concert that's not happening in a conversation about the concert. And so what the Dead could do, right, even if no one had read an article about the Dead, if you walked into the Dead concert, you were going to get a whiff of that. You were going to get,
So to
you were
speak.
going to, as literally,
So to speak, yes.
you were going to be in a state change, right? And if you walk into a synagogue or a temple or a church where that energy, what we call spirit or whatever it is, moving, it's moving, right? Something's happening. We feel it. Now, like those pieces are things that you talk about that when you're talking about Vayhi Mitzaron, it's not in your head, but there's something that's happening affectively that music uniquely can contribute to, together with words and breath, right? Those kinds of things. And so when you talk about this in the book, for example, you talk about, you moved us through, like you gave us a complete fun ride through like from the early reform, like Minhag America to Mishkan Tefillah. We have a lot of different pieces. Do you think that there's something about the ability to play with the form of the liturgy that Reform Judaism uniquely allows it to construct a moving or musical or spiritual experience? That if you were a little bit more stuck in having to see everything that's in the Siddur, might be a little bit more constricting. What do you think about that?
Well, being a Reform rabbi, I would have to say that one of the things that we did really well starting in the 1830s in Germany was we really paid attention to the aesthetics of the worship experience. By the way, sometimes to our detriment. In other words, the danger of the great music was that it would become performative and that it would become frontal. The second thing that we did was we edited out stuff that didn't make sense to us if we were living in Berlin or Frankfurt in the 1860s. We got rid of angels, we got rid of the mystical, again, sometimes to our detriment, because we lost these intuitive, imaginative pieces. But the other thing that we did, clearly, of course, having families sitting together, having men and women sitting together, is we looked at this material critically. And we said, what can we keep? What can we discard? For me, the greatest metaphor for being a liberal Jew, a non-Orthodox Jew, was given to us by the late, great Amos Oz, who said that we've inherited a household of furniture from the Jewish past. We must now decide what will go into the attic and what will go into the living room. Now, I would add and say, for me, some of the stuff has to go out on the street. The anti-women stuff, the anti-Gentile stuff, I'm not interested in it. And if I put it on the street, if you're driving by, if you want it, go right ahead. It's not useful to me or my Judaism. But the other thing is this, the stuff that an earlier generation consigned to the attic, a later generation will move to the living room and vice versa. And that is, to me, a very important part of this sense of Judaism being a verb, and my experience of it always growing and changing.
I'd love you to speak to that, Rachel, because you come out of the conservative movement, as you said. I came out of the Orthodox movement, but the conservative movement, I'm no longer there. I'm now Paradox, not Orthodox. So you are in the conservative movement, and there's a little bit less leeway when it comes to that flexibility. Do you, when discussing prayer or looking at the problem of prayer for moderns or those of us who are in our communities, do you ever wonder that this approach that Jeff has taken or that I might take feeds a kind of consumerist mentality, meaning I'm going to go to synagogue, and if it's not meaningful for me, or if I don't have a good experience, then
You'll just find somewhere else to go.
right.
Look, I mean, either people will say, I think New York City is either the best for this or the worst, because in New York City you can
Starbucks, you can.
Right. I mean, in New York City there are dozens and dozens and dozens of places to find Jewish life. So that is exhilarating and infuriating, because it means that everybody thinks that there's the perfect place that they can find exactly what they're looking for, and I actually don't think that exists for anybody, probably including clergy. I mean, I don't know what perfect means. Whereas I was a rabbi in Syracuse, New York for the first 7 years of my rabbinate, and I would imagine from a percentage-wise, we probably had higher affiliation rates from a synagogue percentage, that more people were affiliated with synagogues in Syracuse than they are in New York City, because that was what it meant to be part of the Jewish community. If you were Jewish and you wanted to sort of show up, you joined the shul. Whereas in New York, that you can be deeply Jewish and not need to do that. Back to your question about prayer. In the conservative movement, and certainly at Sutton Place, we have a very middle-of-the-road centrist approach to prayer and probably everything else we do at shul. I was actually on a panel at JTS yesterday for prospective rabbinical school students, and I described Sutton Place as the synagogue where Judaism is our brand, where we're not known for being the social justice synagogue or the Israel synagogue or this synagogue. We are the Jewish community synagogue, and that's where we really, on purpose, dive in. And if you think about the Trivial Pursuit piece with the 6 different triangles, and you think about the 6 pieces like ritual and tefillah and Zionism and education and community, those different pieces that make up what I would believe are the values of Judaism, that are central. That's what, not Central Synagogue, that's what Sutton Place Synagogue is, and we sort of focus on those for the totality. So the reason I say that is the people who walk through our doors and then walk into our sanctuary are people who are looking for sort of mainstream conservative Jewish life, even if they're not calling it conservative Judaism. They're looking for something steeped in Hebrew, even if they didn't grow up Jewish, because we have a lot of people who are seeking conversion. We have a big conversion institute, which is fascinating, but they want to convert with often people who not always in partnerships, but if they're in partnerships, want to do that in the conservative movement style. So our services are very traditionally based, but deeply egalitarian. So what that looks like is we duchen on the high holidays, where we do the priestly blessing, but we count Bat Kohen and Bat Levi. So we do the full Kriya, the full Torah reading, but again, we call up daughters of Kohen and daughters of Levi, or, women wear talit and tefillin in the mornings, and we require both men and women to cover their heads. We don't do the full Chazara of the Amidah, but again, we do the full Torah reading. So I would say we have a pretty traditional service, but in a very egalitarian mode. We use instruments throughout the year, regardless of when Shabbat starts, but only on Friday nights. But only on Friday nights. So, I think we are straddling the world
of the conservative
movement that has worked for our membership.
But one of the things that I would say that some people have said who have been to JTS or have trained at JTS or whatever might be, and again, this is not a knock against the conservative movement, and certainly you know,
I embrace it.
Right? No, what I'm going to say is not a knock, although people might perceive it as such. But I think that, as you know, you don't really belong to a movement until you're ashamed of it on some level. So I think that each one of our movements has things to be embarrassed by. But where's God in all of it, right? JTS is a kind of theological seminary, but like, where's God at JTS, or where's God in the movements? And so one of the things that I love about your book, Jeff, and what I really love about your book is that you're essentially putting God at the center of this in a way that that sometimes Jews can be accused of kind of leaving. We talk about God, or we talk about the heart, or about devotion, or about love. You even have a quote from our colleague Rabbi Shai Held, who talks about Judaism as love. But very few Jews will walk up to somebody and say, "Do you know God loves you?" Right? We're a little bit suspicious of that. Kind of that sentiment. It's very rare. Judaism is about love, but very rarely will we see it embodied in quite that way. And so you, in your book, walk us through kind of prayers. The structure of the book is about the prayer book, and specifically about evening prayers and Shabbat prayers. And you take us all the way through, and each one of them has a commentary and questions. And one of the things that I loved was that you talked about Shema. And you talked about how, you gave an example of how you would take a classic Jewish prayer, which is an affirmation of faith, and make it more than that, or embodied to a person can actually hear the Shema and experience it. Could you walk us through that, a little bit of how you opened up some of these prayers to help people to smell the fragrance that's inside of the prayer?
You know, when it comes to the Shema and the whole question of what is the meaning of Echad, one of the things I write in the book, and I was teasing my younger son about this because I talk about him in there, is that when he was about 4, he went to see the animated film Hercules. And I asked him what he thought, and he said, "I liked it, but I think Judaism's better." A gifted child, which, by the way, is Yiddish for average. And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, they have a lot of gods, and we only have one, and that's better." I said, "Well, why is it better?" He said, "Well, here's the thing. With all those gods, if you have to pray to all the gods, it's just too much in the service. And if every god gives his or her own Torah, then you'll be there forever." And there was something very wise about that, which is basically what he was saying is that if every god or goddess gives their own Torah, gives their own moral or ethical message, then we will devolve into relativism. So I enjoyed unpacking the meaning of what the Shema means in that particular sense, and there's some scholarly stuff in there as well. One of the things I really tried very hard to do was not to make this an academic book. I wrote this specifically for kids preparing for B'nai Mitzvah or B'I Mitzvah, because I want them to understand what it is that they're saying. And then I discovered, in the process of writing it and editing it, that grown-ups were reading this, and they were saying, "This is really amazing." And there are people who are buying the book and who are telling me they're sneaking it into services with them, and they're reading the commentaries behind the prayer book itself. So I want to get beyond merely the intellectual and also say, how does this affect my inner life and my kish? Because let me give you another example. And I was thinking about this. You know, we're here in the wake of the horror that befell the Beth Israel congregation in Jackson, Mississippi. And as our musicians were singing Lecha Dodi, I knew they weren't going to sing the whole song because, well, first of all, in Reform Judaism, we only sing verses 1, 5, and 9, which is very sad to me because the song really is an opera. It tells a story about alienation and redemption. And there's a moment in that prayer, that song, that hymn, which speaks of Jerusalem as an Ir Nivnata al Tila, a city built upon its tell. Now, if you've been to Israel, if you know about archaeology, a tell is a mound that comprised itself of many layers of destruction. So last year I was leading High Holy Day services in Warsaw, Poland. And a man who I became very friendly with became my guide, and he walked me around the city, and most of the city is the Warsaw Ghetto. I had no idea the ghetto was as large as it is. And he pointed to apartment buildings that were on mounds, on little hills. And he said to me, "Those look like hills to you, don't they?" I said, "Yes." He said, "That's rubble. This entire city was destroyed by the Germans, and we rebuilt the city, and everything you see is built on rubble." And then I started thinking about how that's a metaphor for our own lives, that we are all archaeological digs, that we are, each of us, built upon layers and layers that come from the past. And I'm thinking about what it was like for our friends in Jackson, Mississippi, to be going through the rubble and knowing that they're going to rebuild. Each of us, therefore, is a Jerusalem in miniature. Each of us is a Warsaw in miniature. Each of us is an archaeological dig, layers and layers that go back through the past. So in other words, what I tried to do was to take these prayers and say, this is about you. Not only us, it's about you.
You know, there's a teaching from Rav Nachman of Breslev, the great-grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, that you just made me think of, where the psalmist says, "V'ani tfilati," and as for me, my prayer. And Rav Nachman reads that hyper literally as not my prayer as in the possessive, but as for me, I am prayer. Right? I am prayer. And so what you've done now is you've brought us to this amazing story. You just kind of, the Holocaust survivor who becomes a living embodiment of a prayer book. And I thought maybe you might share that story, how, you know, that he was a living prayer book. And I wondered how that story kind of shaped your own sense of what the Siddur is about. Is that something you have it there somewhere?
Somewhere.
Okay, we'll find it. There's kind of the image of the transformation of a person into, as you said, as the archaeological dig, or that we have these that is, in a sense, a goal of prayer. Is the goal of prayer is not to remain forever searching necessarily within Jewish history or within the prayer book for all of these pieces, but that your life becomes an expression of the values and the sentiments and the images and the qualities that are already embedded in these words, right?
The story that's in the book is about a survivor who tells a story about how when he was in the camps, he became obsessed with the idea that he might become the last Jew, and that he would have to become a repository of Jewish wisdom. And so what he started to do was he started to read the Siddur to himself from memory, because he did not have it, and just read it over and over. And then he said after the war, after liberation, I am the prayer book. I am a living prayer book. I am now the text. And I think that's an important idea because it allows us to personalize it. On the other hand, this is where I would turn towards Rachel. This is the small c conservative Jew in me. I find it very powerful, very important, and very meaningful that I did not invent this tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I have inherited it, and it is my job to give as much of it to my children and to my grandchildren as I can. I know that they will not take it all. I know that they will rewrite it, they will reshape it. But my job is to be a vessel of this tradition and to do my best to give it to my students and to the next generation, because I live with a very small c conservative idea, which is my ancestors were not idiots.
Right. No, I mean, I agree. They came up with something extraordinarily powerful, and the chain is not going to break with us. I mean, so tomorrow night we have our next B'nai Mitzvah family meeting, and I still use your book, Putting God on the Guest List for Kids. So every year our 7th graders and their parents read your book. I've been sending it to them
Thank you.
for 22 years.
Thank you.
So,
That will be orthodontia for my grandchildren.
okay. So Seth Golub, the director of our religious school, is here. So when you were talking, he was, he and I gave each other a look. So it was very exciting. But one of your chapters, as you know, is called A Link in the Chain. And it is important to me that our kids in particular understand what it means to be that link in the chain. And when we talk about Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, that they see themselves in that Elohei, that the God of is the God for each of them, and that they can have that relationship. So I have 2 kids who are 17 and 20, and I'm watching them get ready to go out on their own, which is hard to believe. They've grown up at the shul, and seeing how they are beginning to take their own Judaism and their own life into their own space is fascinating. And my older one is abroad right now, and he's getting ready to travel every weekend as the kids do, and he is going away this weekend, and he said, can you connect me to the rabbi in the city he's going to? So first of all, I'm thrilled that he asked, and B, that he's going to shul. Now, I do not expect him to go to shul in every city he's going, but that he wants to go and that he sees the value in going there, because he understands that going to these different cities and not only bearing witness to the past, but bearing witness to the present is a very Jewish thing to do. And at UT, where he was I don't see him going into the rabbinate at all, but he was definitely seen amongst many of his fraternity brothers as sort of very, very knowledgeable. He organized a Seder for 100 of his fraternity brothers when he was a freshman. And you have all these ZBT guys singing Dayenu. And I got these videos of 100 frat boys singing Dayenu. I have to tell you, it was one of the most meaningful moments to say, the kids are all right. There is something very powerful. There are other videos you don't want to see, but there is something really powerful and emotional that moment of Dayenu connects throughout the generations.
And I think especially after October 7th.
And he started college September of 2023, so all the more so.
My penultimate book, my last book, is Tikkun Ha'am, Israel and the Crisis of Liberal Judaism. I spoke on it when it first came out, and was the first book
Spoke on it here.
written, right, exactly here, in this space. First book written after October 7th. The book was ready to go to the printing press on Friday, October 6th. I went to sleep, and I went to sleep in one era, and I woke up in another. And I called the publisher, and I said, the introduction is inadequate. And he said, you have till tomorrow to write it. So I wrote it that day. It is a snapshot, a Polaroid, a selfie of what the Jewish world already looked like on October 7th. The bad news is that everything I predicted has come true, and worse. But one of the things that I noticed is that I was fearful that many of our young people would not have the narrative, would have neither the Jewish spine or the Jewish mind to speak up to the crap that they're experiencing on the college campus. I mean, Shira is here, and Shira lives a block away from Columbia, and she has been chronicling this since that morning. And one of the things I've come to understand in my travels around the country and meeting young people is that many of them have been able to.
Yeah.
This is a miracle that we did not expect.
Yeah.
I want to come back to prayer for a second and the conversation about prayer, even though, of course,
Sorry.
no, it's okay. Talking about 10-7 is kind of a huge conversation to be had around the North American Jewish life. And one of the things that strikes me as someone who's also in the field, and I take this conversation as almost like, we talked about Reb Zalman. He was a prayer whisperer, and that whole lineage of prayer. What I was looking for in a teacher was discovered in him, kind of like the inner life and the world of Hasidus, and I'd grown up with all of that, the Hasidic literature and so on. But one of the things over the last 20 years that I've been struck by are two things. One is not only the inability to access the prayer book as a resource, which you address in the book beautifully, but like again, as I kind of mentioned this earlier, that the devotional muscle has atrophied in the Jewish life for all kinds of reasons that are legitimate and also just frankly need to be understood perfectly, or more accurately. Like the devotional posture, the gesture, the frame of invoking divinity, the frame of inviting God in the frame of inviting this to be a prayer moment. Some of that also isn't, the fact that you can't access the prayer book but you want to pray will lead to kind of the Hasidic story where, famous Hasidic story where an unlettered child walks into, right? We know, many of us know this story, unlettered child walks into a synagogue and can't pray the words of the prayer, but just offers up the alphabet, the ABCs, and says, God, you make words for me. There are a lot of different iterations of that story. But that story is animated by the difference between prayer and the prayer book. Right? That story highlights that, of course, the posture of prayer is not dependent on particular Hebrew words or Hindu words or Arabic words or English words, but just a desire to connect to God, right? Often I've had over the last 20 years, people walk up to me after, Romamu or other places and say, I really love God, I really am spiritual, I just spent a year doing a yoga training, I've just spent a year in an asana, in an ashram somewhere, why is it so hard to pray Jewishly? And this book answers that question. And the still deeper animating question for me around North American Jewish life is the fluid freedom to invoke God and velo nevosh, and to not be embarrassed, right? We find our Christian friends who are able to spontaneously pray. Many of our colleagues will walk into a hospital during a chaplaincy program and feel like the chaplaincy program will say, you don't have to actually know the prayer book to ask someone who's dying to pray with you, right? Just pray with me. And so I'm often struck by the problem is deep, because it's not, once we get people interested in seeing themselves as you did in the prayer book, that's already the small segment of people who actually see themselves as prayers, as people who want to invoke God, people who feel as if there's a place in their life for spirituality and divinity. And I find frequently that that's a hard, like the first step is even more complicated, which is, can you imagine praying? And so I wonder for the two of you, outside of the prayer book, do you find yourselves praying outside of synagogue? Do you find yourselves praying in the car? Do you find yourself praying in the supermarket? Do you find yourself praying, talking to God, speaking to God in your own language? What are your forms of prayer that aren't in the Siddur?
I pray before I go to sleep. I do not pray upon awakening. And if I hasten to say that I should, I'm already imposing that shouldness on me. For me, it sometimes comes free-floating. Rarely in the supermarket, often in the car, especially in New York, where the Tefillat HaDerech, the prayer for being on the road, is wildly relevant, especially with alternate side parking.
Absolutely. I mean, we all got that.
And sometimes I just pray that the traffic gods will be with me. The reason why this is so hard for so many people is that, number one, I think you named it. For too many of us, for too long, we have defined Judaism as not Christianity. And if Christians do it,
We don't.
then we're not going to do it. I once said, let's give a sermon, echoing Shai Held. I said, I'm going to say three little words to you that no rabbi has ever said to a congregation before. People gasped. And I said, God loves you. That's not a conversation that we have, because we are so focused on how everyone hates us, we forget that God loves us. The other reason that we're having trouble with prayer is we are what I call poetry deprived. Prayer is poetry, and poetry is not a popular literary form in America. We read fiction, we read nonfiction, but many people here, don't prove me wrong, probably cannot name a living American poet who actually is famous. Poetry books don't sell. So we are of a generation that is prosaic, but we don't do poetry well. And thirdly, I think, look, the sad thing is that American Jews are the most secularized sector of American society. We attend worship services less than any other group with the exception of the Unitarians. And the other shocking thing is that American piety in general over the last decade has plummeted. There are reasons for this. Don't ask me now. So we are fighting an uphill battle.
I pray on airplanes.
Mm.
And that happened after I became a mom. I became a much more nervous flyer.
Do you pray for your kids in your own language?
On airplanes?
Not on airplanes. Kids are always on airplanes as parents.
No. I mean, I would say on airplanes, I became a much more nervous flyer, for sure, after having kids. And so my go-to thing is sort of thinking about the Shema and thinking about prayer, and that's sort of my go-to, because I mean, I can't actually control anything at that moment. I'm often almost breaking my husband's hand on the airplane. I mean, I've just become a much worse flyer. So between the breaking of the hand and prayer, that's my response on an airplane. My nephew was sick this past fall, and I went to the hospital when he was having surgery, and I brought my siddur, and I asked my sister before the surgery, you want me to say a prayer with him? And he would have known what that meant. He's old enough. And, I said, you want me to do tefillah? And she was, nope. And I said, okay. And I didn't, because I think she felt it might have made him nervous, and I wasn't. Clearly, I was going to follow my sister's wishes, but it was the only thing I could offer at that moment. Again, I couldn't offer anything medically, and he's okay, but I felt like I needed to be able to do something, and so my something response, aside from just showing up, was bringing a prayer book.
It's really a powerful story, because you mentioned this in the book, Jeff. Anne Lamott, the well-known writer, spiritual writer, had a book. She's a born-again Christian, or she's often infusing her very snarky, cynical, smart writing with really pithy and important insights into the human condition. And she wrote a book where the 4 words of prayer are essentially wow, thanks, sorry, and please. Right? We have our own version of that, right? Mm-hmm. Do you think, using Rachel's story, she shows up at this very vulnerable place and she wants to bring prayer, and respectfully, as really, it's also a great example of honoring where people are and not imposing, and kind of prayer that comes from a place of generosity and nedivut lev, like you're just giving. Which precedes which in your book? Is your sense as someone who's inviting, b'nai mitzvah, bat mitzvah, kind of our youth, the book as a resource to access the Jewish way of describing wow, thanks, sorry, and please? Or hey, we all have these 4 experiences as humans. We have wonder, we have contrition, regret, remorse, ethical sensibilities. We have vulnerability, please, something bigger than me, right? We have gratitude. Is that the way that you're also kind of mining this as a kind of, this is, as you called it, it's social media, it's a museum. You have a lot of metaphors for what the siddur is. Is this kind of a repository of words that point towards that experience? And if you're looking for it, use this, use the modani, use the, aleinu, as these are what we have to do in the world. How would you describe that?
Well, I see the siddur as many things, many metaphors. One that I like the most is that it's the social media page of the Jewish people.
Say more about that.
We all get to write on our wall our own experiences, and then you can kind of go back through it. if you've ever had like a relationship with someone and you have all of their text messages, you can actually go through those texts and it becomes a scroll, and you see how the relationship has evolved or has not evolved. But one of the things I really come to in this is that while there are universal experiences of wow and thanks and oops and all that, the literature of our people has provided us with a way of framing this. And while I grew up in the Reform movement and we were really big into creative prayer and writing our own services at Reform Jewish Summer Camp, and I was very excited and active in that sense, I came to a realization that, again, this small c conservative thing, that we've inherited this language, and the least I can do is to approach the tradition without a chip on my shoulder. And to teach our young people to do the same thing. It has worked. It has worked.
Yeah.
Just one other place of prayer. I have found that at people's deathbeds, it doesn't always happen, but sitting with people and doing the vidui, the deathbed confessional, that's with my rabbinic hat on and sitting and giving people the opportunity. It's usually on behalf of somebody dying. The loved ones sitting with them find it very meaningful. And I don't know, for those of you who go to shul, how long your mishaberach, your prayer list is. Ours is very long, and we have discussed, do we take people off? What does it mean? We don't. People do not want names taken off unless they've healed or passed away. We've discussed it, and we've decided that unless, and we call them, and they say, no, they're good, but please keep them on. And we have a conversation about that. And our mishaberach list is long, but we keep it on, That's a very interesting conversation that we have at shul every few months.
So we're kind of about, what time is it now, Jacob? It's about 20 to 9 or 15 to 9? Okay, we have about 15 minutes until the close of the program. I think it would be great for those of you who came out who want to engage Jeffrey and Rachel or myself or whatever, mostly Jeffrey's book. If you have any questions about things that came up for you that you'd like to ask, now would be a good moment. Do we have another? I can give you my microphone and then we'll go from there. Here, Jonah.
Thanks, Rabbi. I'm curious how much of the challenge in approaching God within a Jewish prayer environment has to do with how God is presented as either a Lord or as a personal God. But the idea of God being the oneness of all, right? So that you're not face to face with God in prayer, but you're actually trying to access that place of singularity. Like, that's a concept that I think, so I'm curious if you could just reflect on the presentation of God. Yeah.
Thank you for raising that question, because it's a large piece of what I do talk about in the book. Every so often in my rabbinate, I would run into people who would say, I hate Judaism, I hate coming to synagogue. And I would ask why, and inevitably they would say something like, every year I come, he's going to kill the kid, then he doesn't kill the kid. And they're talking about the binding of Isaac, and they only come on Rosh Hashanah morning. And I want to put a sticker on the Machzor, on the High Holy Day prayer book, saying, warning, coming to synagogue only on the days of awe will be injurious to your spiritual health. Because the image is of this king sitting on a throne. One of the things I write about in the book is that the prayer book itself gives us more than 100 metaphors for God. The Shekhinah, the feminine indwelling presence, Hatzur, the rock. And I write about how in the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel, they do not mention God. The American Declaration of Independence does, but in the Israeli Declaration of Independence, God is called Tzur Yisrael, the Rock of Israel, which can be either Jewish history or the Jewish people, or could be God. So I think that the problem is that our metaphors are too impoverished. We need not invent new ones, though I commend everyone to Paul Simon's most recent musical work, 7 Psalms, in which he comes up with his own metaphors. The Lord is my record producer, I love, the Lord is my record producer. The Lord figures out the order of the tracks on the album of my life and mixes the music so that the tones that I want come forward. My short answer and a long answer to you is, if you don't like the way God shows up in the prayer book, just skip to the next metaphor. Or as the late Will Rogers once put it, I never metaphor I didn't like.
It's really, unless you think that that's like not orthodox or not traditional, the plethora of metaphors are what the Kabbalah calls, in Kabbalah they call them partsufim, faces. And so it was clear to the rabbis and those who constructed the prayer book and all of the traditional prayers that there are multiple metaphors that we might use. And so the question is, do we have the right, do we have the right or the obligation in our own personal lives to kind of find the metaphor that will give us an access point, right, without feeling as if we become heretics or we're doing something that's contravening the tradition. So I love the record producer and the other, the Zohar introduced us to God as a grandfather, God as a, Atik Yomin, the elder, right? We have a lot of different metaphors for the divine that are wonderful. Anything you wanted to add to that, Rachel?
I think we're also just as we show up for people in different ways at different moments, so does God. I'm only one person, but my relationship with people is different at different times. I'm somebody's rabbi, but I'm also somebody's mother, and I'm somebody's wife, and I'm somebody's sister, and I'm somebody's friend, but I'm still the same person. I'm just different reflections of that same person. It's just, what relationship am I at that moment, and how do we engage in that relationship? And that relationship might shift. I mean, the joke at shul and at home is that the second rabbi on our team is my husband, and he reports to me. And as my kids say, Mom's the boss at home and Mom's the boss at work, and it works just fine. Nice. But figuring out, the president of the shul sitting in the back of the audience right here, so she's laughing, but it works, and we figured out, you can make it work, and I think it works with God also. There are times for me, Rachel, where I sort of want that abstract God on high, like I call it the God of the Grand Canyon, like where I want that moment. And then there is times where I want the God that I can sit with next to the bedside when my nephew is in surgery, to feel like I can call on that God and to be sitting with me. So even if I wasn't saying those tefillot, those prayers out loud, at least that God was with me, even if I wasn't saying it. Mm-hmm. And both gods can exist.
Right, and so that's the question for us in terms of theological dexterity, kind of like not spraining a theological muscle. Do we allow ourselves to toggle between multiple metaphors, even within one prayer? It's clearly in the prayer book. It's kind of like the prayer book is conditioning us to shift these perspectives and not to identify with any one of them exclusively. And I would just argue lastly, and then we kind of open up to another question, the blessing format the rabbis constituted and conditioned us to say, Baruch Atah, Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, that preset has multiple valences to it. It has the immediate Atah, which is you. It has the Melech HaOlam, which is the galactic God, which is what Zalman calls the galactic God, what we call the transcendent divine, that larger space. It has the Baruch, which is the source of blessing. It has a lot in there, the 4 faces of God, as I call it. So anyway, God is a 4-letter name, a 4-letter word, as I say. And we're going to move to another question. Any other questions? Yeah, Claudia. Thank you, Carly.
Thank you so much, both of you. Rachel, I want to speak to what you shared about the moments you pray, because all of them were conditioned on a loss of control, which is flying, someone dying, and someone being sick, and there's nothing you can do about it. Yeah. So I'm wondering if you could speak to the relationship between prayer and control, and whether praying requires some level of release or surrender first.
Nice.
I'm not sure. I think you're absolutely right that you've touched on something profound that I like to be in control, and so when I'm not, I pray. But I'm not sure. Thank you. But I'm not sure I understand the second part of your question. Are there other moments for prayer separate from that?
Like, do people?
Sorry.
I guess is some of the reason that people may choose not to pray is because they feel like they have all the control. Like, I control my job, I control my family, I control my life, so what do I need God and prayer for? Versus these moments where suddenly, or not so suddenly, it's taken away and you're like, oh, there's prayer right there.
Oh, maybe. Now, I will also say, and this goes back to what I was talking about before with sort of the opening of the ark and Vayhi bin Aaron, the irony of everything I said is I don't actually believe intellectually that my prayers are going to make a difference in any of the outcomes of the things that I spoke about. I don't believe that my prayer is going to change whether that plane falls or doesn't fall, whether my nephew was going to be okay or not, or any of the other, or if somebody's going to die or not die. Because if I believed that my prayer was going to make a difference, then I can't believe in that God, because how come other people survive or don't survive? And that's not the God I can work on behalf of. Like, it just wouldn't be fair. There's too much horror in this world. There's too much tragedy that I see and that I have to deal with. So I actually am not praying to change an outcome. I'm praying to manage my response at a given moment. So
I love that.
Okay, so thank you for asking that question, because I know it might sound like semantics, but it's slightly different. Because I know that I'm not actually going to change any of those differences. I just need like a place to put my angst, and so prayer is that vessel.
You know, I've taught that the most important word in the entire Torah is hineni. Here I am. We say it to each other. We say it to God. God ultimately says it to us. And I think what Rachel has said is really very powerful. It is not that prayer can change outcomes, and I think that's a primitive idea that many people still have. It may not even be the case in the psychological sense that prayer will change me. It might. But for me, prayer is the act of knowing before whom I stand and simply saying, Hineni, I am here, as I would do with another human being. And to open my soul to that person and open my soul to God. So in that sense, it's a very human experience.
Do you mind? Can I just add like a coda from I agree with caveat. I think that there's an intense danger with the reduction of prayer to the kind of space, the container that holds the anxiety of being limited or the anxiety of our finitude. And I think that the danger there is that then it instrumentalizes prayer, and the instrumentalizing of prayer becomes problematic for all kinds of reasons, like the instrumentalizing of any religious tradition. I think it's one thing,
or of any relationship,
So I think it's one thing to name that my rational mind says this, but I leave room for the mystery of not knowing how it really works, without asserting in any way that it does work in a particular way. Like, I know for sure that prayer works is hubris. I know for sure that it can't work because it's offensive is also, to me, hubris. And in the middle, I stand as I have no idea if this works or doesn't. I know these are what I've received. I know that it does serve to allay my anxiety because I'm giving it over to God. However, I understand that stream or that presence. I know that my puny will is puny, and I'm going to keep letting go and keep letting go. So I kind of feel like I agree with. Obviously, I agree. I'm hoping. the notion that I was listened to because I prayed for my nephew and someone else is deeply theologically offensive. I agree, but I'm also in that space. I try to have like a little like I don't really know, like maybe who knows.
But for me, it's why I wear a kippah. You know, I say that I wear a kippah as a reminder. There are many reasons I wear a kippah, but especially, and one of the reasons we have anybody who comes on the bima, in particular in shul, to wear a head covering, as a reminder that the world does not begin and end with that person, but that there's something
Love
above.
it. I say the exact same thing, and I was like exactly.
Nice.
There are things above my mind's ability to grok it, and this yarmulke stands as a kind of transcendent principle of humility and so on. Thank you for that really, really deep question. I think we have time for one more. One more. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Want to wait for the microphone right there?
I just want to say what you're saying really resonates with me, and I have come to view when I pray, it's almost like I'm developing my spiritual side, that, you know, a relationship to God and the Jewish people. So when I face a challenge in my life, like when I ran a nonprofit and I faced a lot of big challenges, or when my son was sick, or when I had a personal experience, that it gave me the faith and the strength because of the spiritual exercises of prayer, which became more powerful when I was going through, it built my faith up when I was going through tough situations. You know, it's that I almost built up that spiritual side.
Yeah. You know, there's something important here that I want to underscore, and I keep on coming back to it. And I bounce back and forth between these two poles, as it were, that of keva, of the fixed prayer, and kavanah, the stuff that I'm making up. And I was talking to someone recently who was a secular Jew whose mother died, and she went through all the traditional Jewish rituals, and she was very strict with herself about it. And she said something very powerful to me. She said, "Thank God, literally thank God, I didn't have to invent this. Thank God there was already a recipe that was ready for me." And I said to myself, this is an amazing proclamation and witness about the importance of a tradition. I don't have to make this up. I don't love all the words. I don't love all the images, but you know what? They're mine. I live in a dynamic, sometimes contentious relationship with them, but I'm not going to throw them away cavalierly. Thank God I don't have to make this stuff up.
It's amazing. I remember, this is a story that, I don't think I've told this story in public before, but many, many years ago, I was doing a public conversation with a Hindu teacher down at the Integral Yoga Institute on 13th Street, IYI. And the title of the talks was The Swami and the Rabbi. And I'd been in a long tradition. My own Rebbe was somebody who was doing deep interfaith ecumenical work with various traditions. And a couple came to this conversation and then asked to meet with me afterwards and told me that their daughter was getting married to somebody. Would I meet with them? So I met with them after the next lecture. And we walked across the street to this sushi place. We sat down, and the boyfriend, soon-to-be fiance, said, "I've started my own religion." And I said, "Oh, that's interesting." And he proceeded to tell me that he had written, he's a brilliant guy, he was at Harvard, I think it was, and he had written like a 400-page treatise on his new religion, you know, he called it Yoism or something like that. And it was fascinating. He sent it to me. I read it. It was not fascinating, but we then started to try to construct like a wedding ceremony. And as we began to construct this wedding ceremony, lo and behold, we started looking for pieces, right? To you know, what are we going to do? And a lot of the things we wound up doing were like, oh, this looks a whole lot like a chuppah, or this looks like a whole lot like this tradition. And it was just an amazing moment of like, we don't have to make this stuff up. Shabbat's there, Yom Kippur's there, the holidays are there. You took this beautiful prayer book and you show through, you know, this book how each of these prayers, with the guiding questions too, how a bar bat mitzvah or b'nai mitzvah or b mitzvah student might locate themselves in this chain of tradition, in these links, in that which has been received. You don't have to make it up whole cloth. You don't have to agree with everything, but like between, right, those two things, you have the ease of being able to sit inside of something that's been received. So we're gonna kind of. Do you have something on your mind that you wanted to just close with? Did something get triggered for you, or?
No, no triggers at all, actually. But do want to say that books are available for sale, and we hope that you'll get them.
Absolutely. So the books are available to sale. Thank you all for being with us. Thank you to Shira Dicker for bringing this one, for putting it out there. Thank you to our remarkable musicians for this evening, to the Sparks and Magic. What is it? Sacred Sparks. The Sacred Sparks. What a beautiful way to begin tonight. Thank you to all of you for coming out on a Tuesday night, and blessings to all of you. Thank you. Thank you to Bronfman. Well done.